Okay, we're starting. I just wanted to let folks that the recording has started. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Danny Ledesma, and I'm with PPS, and I see some familiar faces, and I'm so excited to have everyone here. I want to acknowledge that we have our board member, Director Michelle DePass, is here. So thank you for being here with us, and thank you to everyone for tonight. Before we start getting feedback from folks, I have some questions I'd like to ask you. But prior to asking you questions, this is the group where we're really sort of asking folks to drill down on our sort of three proposed options. And so what I'd like to do is go through the three options, and so we have some of those options up there on screen, and I believe our fabulous Chief Engagement Officer might also be able to share the link in the chat as well, so that you can follow along on your own computers or on the screen, whichever is easier for you. And then we are so lucky because we have a little bit more detail and a proposal from our community members to help fill out our option number 3. So we'll be doing some. So we'll take a little bit of break from the screen and allow our guests to present a little bit more. So why don't we jump into the first option, which is option 1. And this option is the proposed amount. And Jonathan, I think we're on option 2 on the screen. Sorry about that. If you could scroll up a little bit. So option 1, there we go. Option 1 is a proposed referral for $584 million. It includes educational improvements, health and safety projects, as well as modernization and rebuilds to these amounts. So it would improve technology investments, curriculum, and special education classrooms at $156.9 million. It includes health and safety projects to the amount of $150.5 million, and then modernization and rebuilds at $200 million. And this would include the completion of Benson and the rebuild, as well as additional funding for management and program contingency. And so you'll notice on that page there's a little bit more detail. The second option, thank you, Jonathan. The second option is option 2. This one is for incrementally more. So this is another close to $250 million more. This option includes is for a $785 million bond option. The educational improvements would include $189 million of technology, curriculum, special education classroom improvements, as well as other investments. The $10 million of sort of like other improvements that's different than what was proposed in the other one allows for some flexibility to include upgrades for gym or physical education, or sort of like outdoor areas that need to be covered, and as well as upgrades to performing arts. So the option for health and safety is $208.5 million. So this also includes what we had seen before, but also additional investments in flexible funding to think about critical facility projects that include more sort of plumbing systems, electrical systems, like remediation of asbestos, some ways to increase some energy savings, replacement of floors, and also foundation and some play structure. The proposed modernization and rebuilds portion is $285 million. This includes the completion of Benson, the multiple pathways to graduation building that's on the Benson campus. It also includes some design and pre-construction of 3 high schools, as well as $10 million in flexible funding to think about future capacity or enrollment needs through school reconfiguration. The design and pre-construction of planning would include Cleveland, Jefferson, and Wilson high schools. Okay, so option 3 is for $1 billion, so another $250 million increment. I'm going to describe this and then ask our guests to kind of fill out a little bit of a vision for a piece of this, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So this $1 billion includes upgrades to technology curriculum and special education classrooms for $161 million. It includes health and safety projects for $198.5 million. And the majority of the increase comes from increases to modernization and rebuilds at $560 million. So this is inclusive of a Benson and multiple pathways to graduation, completion, and new building. It includes design and pre-construction of 2 of the high schools. So it includes Cleveland and Wilson's design, but it proposes $320 million for Jefferson High School modernization. And so I'm going to turn it over to our guests. I believe we have Rukiah Adams from Albina Vision Trust, who's going to be able to provide us some really exciting and more detail about a proposal from our community around what this Jefferson project could potentially look like. I'd also like to welcome our board member, Scott Bailey, who also joined us. So thank you. So Rukiah?
Yeah, thank you, Danny. I assume everyone can hear me just fine. We'll share a presentation with you, but first I want to say thank you to the board members who are here, all of the community members doing so much good work for us, and the parents and students who are on the call. Also want to acknowledge the amount of work that has gone into the 3 different options that have been presented here. I can see, I can only imagine how much work has gone into it, so thank you to the staff for doing that. And before I dive in, I want to be clear that of the 3 options, I think Jefferson's renovation should be included in all of them. So I don't want to make that ambiguous. I'm making the case for a broader vision. And in that regard, I want to share share a presentation with you right now. Let's make sure. Can you see my screen? Give me a verbal yes or no.
Not yet, Rukiah.
Not yet.
Okay. So somebody let me know when you can.
Yes.
Yeah, you can now.
No, yep, it's happening now. Thank you, Rukiah.
Okay, great. So at a high level, I want to introduce the idea that we're proposing here today first before we dive into the details. And the idea is that PPS in this bond issue and its mission is at the center of a very important civic moment that is a part of a longer civil rights movement. Your mission to educate children and inspire them to go on to excellence is exactly what's happening in the streets right now. Right now, the teaching and learning direction has been turned on its head, and we have young people teaching us a civics lesson and teaching us how to be brave in order to take better care of each other. And as I listened to the opening statement today in support of the movement for Black Lives and hearing the description of what happened to William Brown's children, what's clear to me is I would like to encourage the PPS board and all of the folks who serve on the various committees to move from talking about supporting Black lives to investing with intention and action toward putting money toward capital and community investments that actually demonstrate that commitment, not just with words, but with actions. And what we're proposing here is building a model that will generate shared prosperity and commonwealth, specifically focused on excellence for Black children. So the high-level idea is a distributed model for Black excellence that is anchored by Portland Public Schools And we want 3 components to that. The first is for you to bond for transformation, not just maintenance and incremental change. The second is that we'd like you to think about the places that PPS creates and occupies, and we want you to think about how we can build centers for children in those places that PPS occupies. And the third is that I'd like you to think about the various ways that PPS can engage with the city in advocating for the life of the Black child in the city. So the first idea is that we'd like to create a Center for Black Excellence with a distributed model based on schools that are in Lower Albina. At a high level, we want you to imagine that Black and brown boys in particular are not criminalized from infancy, but encouraged to be excellent, that we displace the school to prison pipeline with an intentional early pre-K through college pipeline toward excellence. We want you to imagine that a bond issue could help to create the places that would enable that. The way that we think that can be done, sorry, I'm having a little challenge with my computer, is to envision a Center for Black Excellence that would be anchored by Jefferson High School, Kairos PDX at Humboldt Elementary School, Harriet Tubman Middle School, and connect with those schools the community-based organization that provide the wraparound services to the youth and their families to enable success. Those community-based organizations would include SEI, the Gordley House, Albina Head Start, several churches in the area, the Urban League, as well as POIC and PCC in order to drive academic excellence for these young people. You'll see in the far right edge of this slide, we would like to present the idea of the PPS headquarters becoming a children's quarter, wherein the life of children, the role of children and all of their needs and their lives are focused. We'll have a slide on that next. And you'll also see, we think that the Black United Fund would be an important part of anchoring this Center for Black Excellence. The point of the center would be to create an intentional and comprehensive learning infrastructure in Albina, anchored at Jefferson, in order to unify and elevate Black learning from pre-K through higher education. This illustrates an abstraction of what we're saying, which is that we want to create an ecosystem and concentric circles of support to provide belts and suspenders around the academic programs at schools in order to ensure success of Black children. Again, if we support the movement for Black lives and we want to undo some of the early discrimination against kids like William Brown's kids and the things that we see every day, we have to intentionally design systems around these kids and support them. And I'd like you to think long and hard about the way that a bond issue can begin to do this. This is the idea for a children's quarter. We think that where the PPS headquarters is, whether it's the BESC site or some other site, something like Concordia or somewhere else, would be a wonderful place to think about placing the children's theater, a children's museum, having consolidated athletic facilities that are an excellent standard for all kids in the district. We'd like to have an opportunity to provide continuing education for teachers, and in the case of Concordia and maybe the BESC redevelopment, there's lots of space for affordable housing for the teachers who serve the children that are in PPS classrooms. The third part of the idea, which is innovate, is that we would like, in this process of thinking about transformational investments for the benefit of Black lives, for the PPS board and professional staff to consider reusing or renovating the BESC site so that we can redevelop it with the life of the child within the city at the center of the design. We imagine that that work might look something like the images in the bottom right corner of this slide. We think that if we redevelop the BESC site and find a way to move the headquarters out of that site to rebuild it, that we could have space for another public school, for healthy food within the urban boundary, affordable housing, park blocks, and places of worship. This is a big idea. At its center, we're saying, if we are serious about supporting the movement for Black lives, we have to move capital in support of that. And the capital shouldn't just be for buildings, it should be for providing the supports that these young people need to survive, to thrive. Part one is bonding for transformation. Part two is thinking about PPS's place and whether there can be a children's quarter built around it. And part three would be re-envisioning the BESC site for the life of the child in the city. This is a big idea. It's complicated, but I'm excited to put forth something that we can all do that would be exceptional in these exceptional times. Young people are telling us to use our imaginations and to throw off tradition and bureaucracy in order to do something important. This is what we think might be important. There are a number of next steps. It's very complicated, but we think it's doable and exciting. So that's what I wanted to share with you today.
Thank you, Rukaya, and thanks for participating tonight. I think that's really helpful. So what I'd like to do with our remaining time is to ask participants to reflect on a couple of questions. The first question is, as you think about our three options, which bond option is closest to what you would like to see on the November ballot for voters to consider? And also, I'd like you to think and reflect on what investments make this bond option more aligned with you or your students' needs. And so what I'd like to do now is there is a raise your hand function. And so if you don't mind, we'd like to kind of listen and hear what folks have to say. People are also making comments in the chat, and that is fantastic because we are we're also sort of able to record what's in the chat. So is there someone outside of Portland Public Schools who'd like to maybe provide some reflection or start our conversation about these options? Tony?
This is Tony Hobson. So first of all, I want to say I appreciated the presentation that Rukaya gave. I think when we think about big, that is certainly big, but at these days and times, I think big is exactly what we need to be thinking. I would be in favor of option three. I know it is the largest. I know there's some thought about that being difficult to get $1 billion bond passed at this point in time, but I just think people out there are ready for change. They're ready for something very different. And I think if we were to provide the appropriate narrative around the type of plan that Rukaya just presented to us, I think folks could get very, very excited about something of that scale and be willing to support it at a high level. Anything, in my opinion, that does not include Jefferson High School right now with the environment that we're in, I think is very, very problematic for any bond and very problematic for the district. So if Jefferson is not involved, I think we're dead in the water. You're not going to find Black folks supporting anything that does not include Jefferson. If we do option three, then we don't have the challenge of then what happens at Cleveland, what happens at Wilson, because that particular option gives everybody a chance to win. And for us at the Jefferson and albino community to really win in a big way for the first time in the history of this district.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks for kicking us off, and thanks for the great points that you made. Are there other folks who'd like to share their reflections?
I'm tempted to speak up, but I'd like to hear from people that aren't connected to the district first. I'm actually also here just to listen, but it's hard for me to sit on my hands at this point.
You know, it is. It can be hard. Anybody else?
Hi, this is Tom. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much for your leadership and tackling these complex issues. Uh, One of the things that I find very compelling about something that considers multiple locations and how they work together, kind of separate from the level of investment, is the idea that there's an analysis of optimizing the real estate and the various properties that are correlated to one another. And I'm very moved by this ecosystem notion, something that's not just physical, but it's programmatic, and that there's this support system for our children that is bigger than any one place. It's centered by Jefferson, but it includes a constellation of learning institutions and educators that are distributed around the city, because I feel like that will make it harder for our kids to fall through the cracks. And I really like that idea, combined with the notion of looking at the district's current facilities and trying to realize their fullest potential. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom. I'm hearing a lot of excitement about the sort of modernization, particularly for Jefferson. I'm hearing folks really liking something that is catalytic, something that is transformational. Other folks who want to join in the conversation, share some input? We think about the November ballot. What is an option that you'd like to see voters vote on? I also want to encourage folks that maybe if you haven't landed on one option, maybe just reflecting or sharing maybe elements of the bond options that speak to your student or your needs, and sort of how that is important. I think I just saw an option 3. Thank you, Debbie. Monterina, thank you. Another vote for option 3. More for option 3.
Yeah, I'm wondering if option 3, for the folks that are voting for option 3, there's some components maybe not included in what Rakaya shared. So I'd love to, maybe those folks that said option 3, is it drawing the line at what you heard earlier, or is it expanding on what Rakaya shared?
For me, certainly at least that, and we recognize that what Rakaya is offering in that presentation goes well beyond that. So as she said, it's complicated, it's difficult. There may be additional things that we'd have to come up with. So I don't know that I'm assuming that in option 3 is inclusive with resources to cover what Rakaya was outlining. But at the very least, everything that's listed there, with the thought that that's the direction the district would be heading. If in fact that money isn't there right now, we would be looking for ways to find resources to include the things that Rakaya outlined.
So speaking to that, Tony, I think Debbie had a question around a financial study on the option that Rakaya mentioned. Rakaya, did you want to speak to that?
There hasn't been a financial study yet. I can eyeball incremental additions, or sort of, what costs are, and I think it could be another $50 to $100 million in there. So it's not insubstantial. But I don't know that in these times incremental maintenance is what will inspire voters. I mean, or what will inspire the kids in the schools. So we don't have a financial study yet, and I understand that this idea is splashing into a process that is pretty well baked. But if there was ever a time to pivot and really think about why we educate these children and the message they're sending us, it's now. So I think that those ideas we could probably come up with a study relatively quickly to support whatever decision the board would make.
Thank you, Rakaya. Any other sort of conversation or discussion on this? We've got about 4 more minutes together before we transfer over, and we want to make sure that folks have a good opportunity to be in dialogue and to share what they believe. I also really appreciate everyone that's using the chat function. But while we're here, any other comments for us?
So I have to ask, is there a role for Boys Elliott Humboldt in the vision?
Yes. So the initial thinking is that the Humboldt campus is a place for early pre-K, and K through 5. So yes, it's a really important location. And we really like it for this Center for Black Excellence because enlivening Humboldt will allow us to create pedestrian pathways and some urban design in support of children in the city to make sure that they're safe navigating the neighborhood as they move between the campuses. So absolutely, both Boise Elliott and Humboldt.
Okay, because you hadn't called that Boise Elliott before, so I didn't know.
Yeah, I just made a mistake. But
Oh, no,
you're on it.
Yeah, I would make the assumption that whether or not we're talking about this from a financial standpoint, there are a number of schools in and close and around Jefferson High School that I think would ultimately we would want to be a part of this. You got Ockley Green that's very close. You got King that's very close. So I don't know that we would be doing this without including some of those other schools to be a part of the overall vision. The resources that we're talking about may support the ones that are identified here presently, but I would assume that others would come alongside for this to have the kind of impact that we hope for.
Thanks.
So can I, actually, Michelle, if you want to go first, because you were.
Because I was putting my
nobody
hand.
else wants to say anything. If nobody else off the board wants to say something, Michelle, if you want to chime in.
Well, I had a couple things to add. One of the things is that some of you have heard me say I'm revisiting the reading of Peter Senge. He's a management, an organizational development expert, and it's required reading in graduate business school. So some of you are familiar with it. And he has these concepts about the 5th discipline that include systems thinking, mental models, and building a shared vision among the 5 disciplines that he says are needed to move through team learning together. And we have an opportunity to kind of operationalize those concepts here with this concept. The other thing is that Albert Einstein has a quote I use, and it's on the back of one of my business cards, and it says, "Imagination is more important than knowledge." And coming from a creative thinker type, I feel like it's very important to vision what you want and not make yourself small in that visioning space, and figure out and think like an artist. So we have this vision that's not going to be done in 2 years. It might be a 20-year process, but to put the concept and the master planning in place right now requires the vision of the community coming together and actually like putting that investment and that commitment and that vision as our North Star, as our guiding principle, and demonstrating, not just talking about equity, but a way to actually operationalize and see this vision, right? So I just wanted to put out there that the visioning piece is really important. You cannot have if somebody gave me a lump of clay today and said in 6 weeks it needs to look different, I would envision something in my mind. It's going to be a vessel of some kind. And I would have 6 weeks to get it from the lump of clay to my vision. And so I'm saying that with this project and these concepts that Ms. Adams put forward, gives us the opportunity to be creative as a community and also demonstrate our commitment to Black Lives Matter. So we've never really had any demonstration of that. We've talked about it a lot in our community, but we don't really have a lot of on the ground demonstration of what that looks like. And we haven't demonstrated to the community what Black excellence looks like, and we haven't funded it. And so I just wanted to put that Peter Senge thing out there because it's on my nightstand. I read a little bit every night. And I love the visuals that you presented, Ms. Adams, and that we need to think big as a community. This is an opportunity that we like no other. And I'm hoping that we, as a community, build a shared vision around what we envision for our Black children.
Thank you, Director Pass. I'm so sorry, Director Bailey. I'm going to have to just put us on pause for a moment and invite folks who would like to stay to kind of continue this conversation. You're more than welcome to stay, but also we have some new folks who are joining, but there are three other breakout groups. We'd love to hear your opinions about those as well. So we're going to get started. For some folks who have just arrived, we'll go ahead and get started in just a moment, allow people to transition out and in. And for folks who provided comments and the chat and everything, thank you so much for your engagement and listening. And we will continue to hopefully hear more from you in this process. Thank you very much. Thank you and welcome, everyone. So we're going to give a couple more moments for folks to join us. And for folks who may have to leave, go to the next one, we'll let folks do that. Okay, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get us started because there's a lot of information to share, and we'd like to get as much comment from you as possible. So my name's Danny Ledesma. This is the breakout group about the bond options. We're going to have a discussion about those before we're going to share everything with you. I do want to acknowledge that we have quite a few board members with us that we're really excited to have. We have Director Scott, Andrew Scott. We have Director Bailey, Scott Bailey. We have Director DePass, and I believe we have, that might be all of our board of directors. So thanks for joining us. So as we begin, Jonathan is going to share on the chat a document that has us go through 3 options, and then we are really fortunate that we have a community partner who's also here to give a little bit more detail to one of the options. So what we're here to discuss today are 3 bond options. The first option, and Jonathan will pull that up on the screen. The first option is a referral for $584 million, and it includes investments in 3 areas. So educational improvements at $156.9 million, health and safety projects at $150 million, and then modernization and rebuilds at $200 million. This is sort of like the base level, if you will. So it includes technology curriculum and special education classrooms at that $156 million for educational improvements. It includes roofs, mechanical, seismic, and ADA accessibility at the $150 million level. And on the modernization and rebuilds, it assumes a completion of Benson High School as well as as the new building on the same campus for multiple pathways to graduation, the completion of those for $200 million. There's also the sort of management and program contingency items. The next option is option 2. And so this is, $785 million. And so it includes the investments for educational improvements at $189 million. This adds $10 million of other improvements, and those include flexible funding for additional investments such as gyms for physical education, outdoor play, and visual and performing art spaces. Under the health and safety projects, there's additional $10 million for other improvements. And these are critical facilities issues such as plumbing systems, some electrical systems, remediation of asbestos, energy savings, flooring, and some foundation and also play structure. It includes investment for modernization and rebuilds at $285 million. And so what's included in here is $62 million of some design and pre-construction work for the construction of 3 high schools. And these include Cleveland, Jefferson, and Wilson high schools, as well as $10 million in funding to address future capacity or enrollment needs as things get reconfigured. So then our third option, and we'll have our special guests present a little bit, but I want to sort of go through, this is the $1 billion option. This includes investments in educational improvements, investments in health and safety projects. The key difference is including $320 million under modernization and rebuilds for Jefferson High School modernization, as well as $40 million for some design and pre-construction for Wilson and Cleveland High School. And one thing that's in this document is that when we talked about the modernization of high schools, Jefferson was ranked higher than other schools, and so this one acknowledges that ranking. I'm really thrilled to be able to invite our community partner Rukiah Adams with Albina Vision Trust, who would like to share some pretty visionary options that would probably fall under this third option that would be open for your consideration. And so I'm going to turn this over to Rukiah. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Danny. It's so nice to have the time. Before I jump in, there are a few other people on the call from the team. If someone else from the team can drop the PDF into the comment section, that would be great. Before I dive in, I want to say thank you to the staff and to the board and all the folks at PPS who are doing all this amazing work. It's incredible to see. It's also incredible to be here thinking about a bond issue at a time when an important moment in American history is dovetailing with the mission that PPS has in educating children. One of the things that I see in thinking about this bond issue is that the teaching, learning directionality is being turned on its head. And we're learning a lot about civics, bravery, taking care of each other from the teenagers who are in the classroom. And in that regard, they're essentially saying to us, if we're supporting the movement for Black lives, if we're serious about undoing some of the institutional racism that has played out in our classrooms and our schools, then we need to move some of our resources in support of building communities and places that are important for children. So one of the ideas that's percolating in the community is to use this bond issue to do 3 things. The first is to build a Center for Black Excellence that's anchored by PPS schools, starting. Scott, can you hear me? Is there something were you wanting to say something? Couldn't tell if there was a question there. No, okay. Wanting to start with a complete renovation of Jefferson High School, some design work for New Harriet Tubman, some renovation on Humboldt, where early pre-K, and elementary school students can be investing in Boise Elliott, connecting those schools with King and some of the other schools in the area, and then building into the Center for Black Excellence the support of community-based organizations in Albina that have historically done a wonderful job in helping those children to achieve academic excellence. We want to create a Center for Black Excellence because we want to displace the school to prison pipeline that threatens the vitality of our communities. We want to replace that with an intentional system of early pre-K through college for those same children. So we call that the Center for Black Excellence. That's the first idea. The second part of it is that we'd like PPS in this bond issue to think about how its headquarters space and the spaces that you occupy can become places for children. We'd like you to create a children's quarter, a place where the Children's Museum, the Children's Theater, PIL Sports, maybe a health clinic, and other services that are specifically centered around the life of the child can be co-located and benefit children. The third big idea that we're proposing for this bond issue is that you consider a joint venture with Albina Vision to redevelop the land where the BESC building is in order to design a part of the city around the life of the child. That means we think about intersections at child height. We think about lighting on Black and brown skin. We think about the needs of children in neighborhoods and family-scaled housing. So in this bond issue, of the three options that are presented, I want to be clear that in any choice that you support or recommend or put forward, I would very much like the renovation of Jefferson to be included, but I'm saying that's not enough. In this moment, as young people are telling us to think big, to take care of each other, to be serious about our support of Black lives, I would implore all of you to think about how we can use the bond issue in order to really drive transformational and catalytic change in the community. So what we will do is share in the comments section a slide deck that provides a little bit more detail on this idea, but I really, really, really would like you to think about this moment and how brave we can be for the young kids in the street. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you so much, Rakaya. Folks got a really quick overview of the three bond options. And so what I'd like to do is open it up to the group to have some discussion. I'd like to invite everyone to reflect on two questions. We'd really like to hear from each of you to understand which bond option is closest to what you would like to see on the November ballot for voters to consider. And then as part of that reflection, we'd love to hear what investments make this bond more aligned with you or your students' needs. I want to invite folks to do a couple of things. I'd like us to make sure that we're really focused on these three bond options, and then two, ask folks to just go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll do that. And then also don't be shy to use the chat function as well. I don't know if you can see, but we've got lots of folks who are engaging on the chat function. So who would like to, oh, I think we've got someone. Go ahead, Dee Cohen.
Yeah, hi, I'm Donna Cohen. And I really need to point out here that in terms of the racial equity and social justice, and working with communities that have been neglected. In the last session, I heard that the Roosevelt build was done. And I want to emphasize the Roosevelt build has not been completed. Roosevelt is the comprehensive high school that is the most diverse. I believe Jefferson is in another category of not comprehensive. It's also possibly in the lowest income community, or certainly one of the lowest income communities. When it was remodeled, it was underbuilt. It was consciously built for fewer students than we are having and will have in the next couple of years. Consequently, we need an additional building for those classrooms, and it was not built with a proper STEM facility. That was to be corrected in 2016 when the board passed a resolution and said, we're going to build a building, and half of that, no, this is important because we should not go on and just pretend as though we have done an adequate job and let's move on and leave not only something that's incomplete, but that's incomplete in one of the communities, my community, that needs the most and that has been acknowledged by PPS as neglected. So if that needs to be in the bond, and if you just move ahead and ignore the needs of Roosevelt, then there's going to be, that's going to have its consequences, I think.
Thank you. Stephanie Chase, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, my name is Stephanie Chase, and I'm the parent of PPS students that have been at Pioneer, which was faced with being closed, at Benson, which has repeatedly been put off for renovation. So I'm pleased to see it in this, and an incoming freshman at Jefferson. And to me, I would just say the only bond option, if we're going to focus on these three options that make sense, is the expensive one, is option 3, because it's the only one that really starts to make noticeable, discernible change in some of our communities, certainly not all of them, as the last speaker has brought up, that need significant investment. I continue to be disappointed by PPS's investment in our majority white high schools that already have significant experiences and resources available for students at what feels like the expense of students who do not live in those communities. So to me, I just want to say, because the only option that has Jefferson receive the attention that it deserves, again, being high up on the list and continuously pushed off, the only one that makes sense in these three options is the option that includes the build for Jefferson. Thank you.
Thank you. Brad Nelson?
Yeah, thanks very much. I think to echo what Stephanie just said, I am in a lot of ways very shocked that Jefferson is not included in all three options. It seems like the district is forgetting the narrative that was played out, or we have been, providing to people over the last several bond campaigns, is that we would address the high schools in an order. We would go through and deal with each of the high schools. I think option number 1, woefully forgets that promise. Option 2 pretends that it kind of remembers it, and option 3 at least remembers the school that needs it the most. I think there is I think it's a very difficult situation to try and win a campaign or win a bond measure. And if you now are coming back, I heard in another room that maybe we need to focus on other things, things other than high schools. You got to think about what this, what that narrative was leading up to this. People have been promised certain things, and now what it feels like is that you're going back in those promises. So 1, I'm shocked that Jefferson is not on each one of these. That's very, very disappointing. And 2, I'm disappointed that the other schools are not at least provided, significant funding to go to the next phases of the study. So, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there other folks that would like to share sort of which bond option you'd like to see on the November ballot, or sort of key into a specific investment that you think is more aligned with your students' needs? We've got about 11 more minutes before we transition, and for folks who may want to share their items in the chat, feel free to do that. Also, want to invite us to sort of be in dialogue. We've certainly had a lot of really interesting discussion so far. We also have our 3 board members who are with us, who are really interested in hearing, because ultimately they'll be providing this direction to staff about sort of what gets referred. So we'd love to hear your voices, or read your opinions on this.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
This is Jacqueline Roebuck-Sacco. I have 2 children at Jefferson High School, and one that just graduated. So I looked over all 4 options, and my question is, why do we need a multi-pathways high school when Jefferson is already situated to do just that? So with their connection to PCC, it would seem to me it would save more money, because of course option 4 is the most expensive, which means it's probably not even going to be considered. But it's more expensive because included in that option is still the creating of the new multiple pathways high school. So why isn't Jefferson being considered for that? It would save money, and it would also get Jefferson we get the construction done, and the school brought up to standard.
Thank you. That's a great question. I don't believe we have anyone.
Hey, I can give a quick response to that, if that's okay. Hi, Jacqueline. So the multiple pathways to graduation building is a building that will be comprised of a number of alternative programs in our school system, namely Alliance High School and DART and other kind of alternative offerings for students who may not think that the traditional comprehensive schools are useful or beneficial to them. So it's about 4 or 5 different small high school communities coming into one. That's the multiple pathways to graduation.
Yeah, great to see you again, Jonathan. Thank you for that response. However, it still doesn't quite, again, if Portland Public Schools, I believe, has adopted the best practices of inclusion. And so if we are to believe that fully inclusive schools work, then those students could still be a part of the new Jefferson High School. So I still don't understand why we need that much money to create a new high school, which puts Jefferson as my passion first. But the other 2 high schools at Bay as well, it just doesn't make sense to me to have to put that money into a new structure when, again, we could connect Jefferson directly to PCC, and also Jefferson has enough room that we could house whatever types of alternative education options were needed. There's plenty of space there at Jefferson to do that. And again, if we are to get behind the notion that inclusive education is the way to go in the future and it serves all children, then I'm still not understanding why we would isolate some other kiddos.
Thank you.
This is Stephanie. I just have a quick question as a follow-up to that maybe, Jonathan, you could answer. Is there a reason that school, the Alliance School, is on the Benson campus? And again, I have a student who attends Benson High School, but how much integration, is it that there's integration with the CTE programs at Benson? Is there a reason that schooling couldn't be offered at Jefferson, as Jacqueline suggested?
Yeah, I'm happy I'll do a response on the chat so we can hear more folks articulate. I'll answer both responses, or both questions.
Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. Other feedback or thoughts or questions?
Hey, Danny, this is Andrew. I was wondering if I could just jump in. So the vision that's being put out there for sort of a Center for Black Excellence is really exciting. And one of the things I commented on a couple weeks ago at our board meeting was a concern I had about whether the community had sufficiently had time to weigh in on what sort of the ultimate vision was for the Jefferson campus and potentially beyond that. And one of the things that I've been really convinced of prior to this, but even hearing the conversations in the last room I was in here, is that we have to move forward with Jefferson. And I'm really intrigued by this idea of Jefferson Plus, right? That not just modernizing the high school, but building something else. And I guess a question I would have for folks on the call, what do we need to do? Because one of the things in the campaign I heard constantly was the community doesn't want the board making decisions for them. They want to co-create those solutions with the board. And what do we need to do to include this so that we actually have the time, not just to modernize Jefferson, but to sort of coalesce around this vision? Because what Albina Vision Trust has put together is fascinating. And I would just love to hear, like, what should we include in this bond to make sure that we have that time and we can get to something that the community wants to see.
Is there anyone who'd like to respond or sort of add to that conversation?
I'll just say, sorry, this is Jacqueline Sacco again, that it doesn't seem to me that moving forward without this understanding around why a new building, as opposed, that would knock out the idea of Jefferson being given its proper due. And I think that the board would have to consider that first, because again, that would take off that exuberant amount of money that option 4 is calling for, that allows all 3 of the high schools to be given their proper due, but Jefferson for sure, as it was put off in 2014 and promised in 2020. I don't know, in these days and times, it just seems to me that to move and push Jefferson back again would be calling for, I don't know, maybe a socio-cultural atmosphere that we're not ready for.
Jacqueline, thank you so much for your comments. You're really helping move us along, so I really appreciate it, and you're bringing up really good questions. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, we're pretty close to sort of an opportunity for folks to go to another breakout group. So I want to encourage folks to kind of continue to use the chat. And Sandy had a question about option 4. And so I think there may have been a little bit of confusion. Option 4 could be something, I think the way that we've sort of conceived of this is that the option that the concept that Ruqayyah brought up would be sort of like part of an option 3, but it was sort of like a 4th presentation. So hopefully that doesn't add to confusion. Thanks for asking that question.
Can I make a
Absolutely.
comment? And Andrew, feel free to chime in. So we've got different options out there with different dollar amounts, and the different dollar amounts imply different how long the bond would be for and how long before we'd go out for a next bond. So way back when, our original intention, our original concept was an 8-year bond for about, I think, $1.4 billion that we would do 3 high schools and then do roofs and all the other stuff. When we looked at what was going on with our buildings, it became apparent that we couldn't do that. We've had stuff that we put off in our buildings that we can't ignore anymore. It's not just roofs, it's HVAC systems. We don't want to see heating go out in the middle of winter in our buildings. And we're looking at those kind of things happening very possibly in the next couple of years. It's really apparent our technology is old and it needs a lot of work. So some new things, new needs became front and center that said we can't do 3 high schools and those kind of basic things that we need in an 8-year, $1.4 billion bond. So that's what the board has been struggling with. And then COVID hit. So that option one, that $580 million one, was meant to be a 2-year placeholder to get some stuff done while we kind of took a step back to see what would be coming next. In any case, whichever our high schools, and I think Jefferson is clearly recognized by the community as our #1 next high school priority, work on that wouldn't start until 2022. We need 2 years of solid planning on the building, and construction wouldn't start until 2022 at the earliest. So that's why we ended up with, as a potential option 2, that would include the planning money, so that if we came back in 2022 for another bond, that would be the construction funds, and Jefferson would be ready to go, boom, as soon as the bond passed, construction could start. So I just wanted to give that some of that context of where the board was coming from, hopefully for you to understand. The other observation I would have is, looking over history, the window for making big changes only stays open so long. So I just want to thank Rukiah and her group and other members of the community for saying, the window's open now, we got to strike now, because in 2 years, who knows? So I appreciate that. The challenge for the board is that that $320 million for Jefferson in option 3 is really kind of a placeholder. And the community in the past broadly has demanded that our bonds have a dollar and cent. We know where every dollar and cent of that bond is supposed to go. Right now we're in a more aspirational moment, which is great, which means we don't know exactly what, that broad Jefferson project is. So if we go and ask voters for a chunk of money to do good things at Jefferson, we don't know exactly what that means, and we would need some help with the community to convince the broad voters to say, this is the way to go. It will be developed hand in hand with the community, a comprehensive plan going forward, but we certainly don't have that comprehensive plan. It's not something we're going to pull together in the next month to get on the ballot.
Thank you, Director Bailey. I have the charge of sort of asking folks to first welcome new folks who are coming in. This is the breakout session for bond options. For folks who were in our session, I want to invite you to join one of the other breakout groups if you'd like. You're also welcome to stay, of course. We're going to give folks maybe a few more, maybe like a minute and 20 seconds to join, and sort of as we transition, this will be our last and final breakout group, and we'll start with just a little bit of a presentation about the options, and then open it up for discussion, ask folks to kind of reflect on these options, and then share all the things that you have. I want to encourage folks, as people are coming in, to go ahead and feel free to use the chat function that will be there. And then we are going to be looking at the 3 bond options, and Jonathan Garcia is going to also share that again in our chat, because folks who just joined won't have access to it before. So we'll be going over this document in just maybe 40 more seconds as people join. And while people are joining, I want to acknowledge that we're really fortunate to have members of our Board of Education who are really here to listen and really excited to hear what people's feedback is. And so we have Director Rita Moore, We have Chair Amy Constam. We have Director Andrew Scott, and I believe that might be all of our board members. So now that we have our board members set, we want to have a discussion about breakout session number 4, which are the bond options. So on your screen, we have 3 options that are here. The first option is for option 1 is $584 million. It proposes investments in educational improvements such as technology, curriculum, special education classrooms for $156.9 million. It also proposes investments in health and safety projects at $150.5 million. Option 1 includes modernization and rebuilds at $200 million. This is inclusive of Benson's completion, as well as the multiple pathways to graduation building that's part of the Benson campus rebuild. So this is the sort of like first option. This is the option with the smallest dollar amount. Our next option is option 2. This option is for $785 million. This includes $189 million for educational improvements. It also includes $10 million of other flexible funding to be able to address educational facility investments. So upgraded gyms for physical education, outdoor covered outdoor spaces for play, as well as spaces for visual and performing arts. The health and safety projects also includes an additional $10 million. So we were proposing to invest $208.5 million in health and safety projects. This includes other improvements at $10 million. That is flexible funding to address critical or essential facilities. This includes plumbing and electrical systems, remediation of asbestos, energy savings, flooring replacement, as well as repair of play structures, as well as foundation work. The modernization and rebuild investment is at $285 million. This includes the critical pre-construction and design for our 3 high schools. That includes the Cleveland, Jefferson, and Wilson high schools. It also includes $10 million of flexible funding to address future capacity or enrollment needs. The third option, and I'm going to invite our community partner in just a moment to add to this option 3, but this proposes $1 billion for the bond. This option has $161 million for educational improvements, so it includes that sort of base level of technology curriculum, special ed classrooms. It includes the same sort of base level of health and safety projects at $198.5 million. What's different about this one is that in addition to the completion and the building of the MPG, the multiple pathways to graduation building on the Benson campus, it also includes $320 million for a Jefferson High School modernization, which was ranked higher than the other high schools on some of the modernization criteria when we were first prioritizing this earlier. It also includes the sort of design and pre-construction for Cleveland and Wilson. So those are the 3 options. I'd like to invite one of our fantastic community partners, Rukiah Adams. Rukiah is with Albina Vision Trust, and she would like to share with you a pretty exciting presentation about sort of ways that we can reimagine the Jefferson campus. So I'm going to turn it over to Rukiah. Thank you for being here with us tonight.
Thank you, Danny. I want to say thank you to the PPS staff and board members and all of you folks who are spending their evening thinking about how we care for and educate our children. It's really exciting to see you. I also want to acknowledge how much work has gone into the 3 options that we're discussing, and an acknowledgement that this idea that I'm about to share with you is splashing into a process that has been going for a long time. But given the monumental civil engagement that young people are demonstrating on the street, and the deep questions and inquiries that we're having as Americans, it felt like this moment was the moment for the Albina Vision team to share some of our highest aspirations. So before I share a couple slides with you, I'd like to say that what we're asking for you to think about, the PPS board to think about, and for Portland taxpayers to think about is what is the opportunity for us to unite and make transformational investments in support of Black lives. We heard at the start of this program that PPS is committed to that with words. Well, it's time for us to stop the talk and walk the walk. And the walk means committing resources to capital projects and to community-based solutions that help young people push aside the school to prison pipeline with something that will help them go from pre-K to professional life without success. So that's the high level issue. I understand it's a big idea, but I want you to be open to it. So before I show you the slide, the big idea is that the bond issue be used to create a Center for Black Excellence that's anchored in the Jefferson cluster with the schools adjacent to it. So Jefferson High School, some design work for Tubman Middle School, and some design work for the improvement of Humboldt, where Kairos early pre-K and pre-K could be located. Connecting the work and wraparound services there with King School and with Boise Elliott School, and pulling in the incredible work of community-based organizations that serve those youth and their families, including SEI, the Black United Fund, and a number of other community-based organizations in the neighborhood. So what I'm going to show you now is a slide. Can you see my slide? Can someone audibly tell me whether they can see it?
Not yet. Would you like Jonathan to share it? Would that be easier?
It may be easier. Jonathan?
Let's have Jonathan share your slides.
Okay. So Jonathan, if you will go to the slide for the Center for Black Excellence, that would be great. It's the third slide. So the big idea is to connect the impact of these institutions and anchor them in schools using bond proceeds and improving making capital investments in the schools in order to connect students and unify the African American community to elevate success and educational outcomes for Black children. So these brown spots indicate either schools or institutions that support young people's lives. So this bond issue and committing to Jefferson, I want to say that no matter which option is chosen, 1, 2, or 3, I believe the Jefferson renovation should be included, but it shouldn't just be about improving the building. It should be about improving outcomes, and improving outcomes means we have to be more intentional about creating a Center for Black Excellence. So it's about connecting these geographies. Jonathan, if you can move to the next slide. An abstraction of what we're saying in investing for the Center for Black Excellence is putting a bullseye on the outcomes we want and connecting all of these organizations together. Big idea number 1, Center for Black Excellence. Big idea number 2 is think about the ways that the PPS campus, where the headquarters building is, can be used to create unique experiences for the life of the child. We'd like you to think about creating a children's quarter connected to the PPS headquarters that would allow a children's theater to be placed there, a children's museum to be placed there. We could have sports facilities. There are a number of options around town, including the BESC site and some of the other campuses that have been vacated, where all of these services can come together, including continuing education for teachers. The third part of this big idea, again, for option number 3 or greater, is to contribute to using the BESC site to create a kid city, meaning a part of the city that is designed around the life of the child and their families. That means family-sized affordable housing. That means streetscapes that are designed to be safe for children, thinking about street signs and corners, whether someone who's 4 feet tall can see around important, dangerous corners. It means thinking about the color of street lights on the street and whether the blue spectrum light illuminates dark brown skin at night or doesn't illuminate brown skin at night. So the big idea is to use the BESC site to rebuild a part of the city and to design it around the life of the child. So that's the high level idea, and it is option 3 plus. But I'm presenting this knowing that this process is halfway through, because the kids in the street are telling us it's time to be brave. It's time for us to think big and make catalytic investments in their long-term success. If we don't, then the civics lesson that they're giving us in the street, it will be shameful that we will not have stepped up to the expectations that they've set. So that's all I have to share. Let's be brave. Let's be big. Let's do it together. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you so much, Rukiah. And I see a lot of heads nodding, and I see a lot of folks that I know who are going to really help ignite our conversation. So I'm really excited. So I'd like to just sort of throw out 2 questions to help get our conversation started. Ask you to reflect on which bond option is closest to what you would like to see or what you would like to recommend to the board on the November ballot for voters to consider. And then as part of that, are there investments or pieces of the option that are more aligned with what you or your student needs? And so I'd like to just kind of open up the question. Our board members are here, our board chair is here. We'd love to have the dialogue be with community members so that we can really listen and hear. And then also, I would encourage people, if you're shy, I see maybe a few shy people, but if you're shy, feel free to also use the chat. So go ahead and invite folks to kind of enter into the space and share your reflections.
Well, first, I just want to say thank you so much, Rukiah, for that presentation, and to see those slides and to see these ideas come together and see it presented in that such a coherent way. It's extremely exciting to think about what we can do for our kids. So thank you for your advocacy.
Thank you, Chair Constam. Other
And
folks?
I believe Tony Hobson may want. I saw him wanting to speak, so I don't know.
Oh yeah, Tony, please.
You're on mute. Oh, so you don't want to speak? Okay, never mind.
Great. Other folks who'd like to speak?
I'll speak. Hi, my name is Mary Merriweather. In the last 2 sessions I attended, also got to express long-term, well, all my life, a community member here, very vested in our community, our family, generations are very vested in this community. Was PTA president at Jefferson High School from about 2008 or so to 2013. And was a part of the redesign program that sat with Carol Smith at the time, and many of us, when we actually did negotiate around Jefferson becoming Jefferson Middle College and such. Okay, so been in several of these meetings and attempts to really look at investing in Jefferson High School. And at the time that I was PTSA president, actually was even given blueprints of what our building would look like and could look like. So we've been here several times, and once again, we're here, but we are believing that our voices will be heard. And we have faith and confidence that us coming around this mountain again at this particular time, that there's something significant about that as well. I want to thank you, Rukiah, for that amazing presentation, that you brought something not with just words, but you've given us a vision. And what I shared in the last 2 sessions is that I really am challenging our paradigm, that we're not just looking at investing in buildings, but we're looking at investing in generations. We're looking at investing in our students. We're looking at investing in very high potential of students that we're raising up right now. And this is the moment that we can shift some things and make a difference. Our kids, our Black kids, have seen these kinds of investments built all around them and them be neglected long enough. It has become something that they have really almost become their narrative. And we're trying really hard to keep them encouraged, to keep them empowered, to keep them believing that they can move forward. But when they look around and they don't see that kind of investment coming from outside of their community, in giving them the kind of environments that they can thrive in. And I'm really excited about Rakaya's what she's bringing to the table, because our kids deserve to have environments that nurture who they are and the potential that's in them, their creativity and such. I'm also including in that we cannot move forward without making sure that when we look at the curriculum, we're talking about being culturally specific. We must, along with the buildings, we must include African American history in the curriculum for all students. We're seeing that now, that everyone now is like, wow, we didn't know. We want to know, we want to learn. I have people coming to me every day. Where do I start to educate myself about African American history? Let's not let this generation have to do the same thing. This is a moment that we want to invest in the generations coming up behind us, not just buildings, yet we need the buildings. We definitely need our children to be in environments that encourage and inspire the best that's in them and makes room for what's in them, not just what we want to put on them.
So I'm off mute now.
Great.
Appreciate that, Ms. Merriweather. I mean, I don't know what else I need to say after that. That was wonderful. But given the presentation and the concept of Black excellence, I mean, that is a beautiful concept. I know there's some concern about $1 billion from the board's perspective as to whether or not we can pass that. I feel like if we can't pass it now, we'll never be able to pass it. I don't know whether y'all noticed, but Black is in right now. It ain't never had for a long time, but Black is in right now. I mean, everybody's saying Black is beautiful. So now is the opportunity for us to push forward with something that is unique and different. Portland Public School has made incremental changes for years. It's now time for something bold, something transformational, and we have the opportunity to do this with the concept that Rakaya has put before us. I don't think that you'll get nothing but much, much love around something that big, that beautiful, that bold for Black folks, but goes so much beyond that. It is very inclusive. And as we do this for the Jefferson community, there are other communities that are now a part of this that will be able to take advantage of this in the same way. So I think the option, the 4 million is the one, and we should collectively rally around that concept. And if we put the narrative out there that we're capable of pushing in this environment, I just think it'll be a tremendous success, not only immediately, but long-term. And we rarely get a chance to talk about the long-term vision when it relates to Black people, because we're always dealing with the issues and the challenges of today and not be able to think about 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And this particular option gives us that window, that opportunity.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Tony. Other folks like to add?
I don't think I can say anything better than anybody else has said it, but I do want to say that the main reason why I'm here is because I work at Jeff. I've only been there for a little while. I've only lived in Portland for a little part of my life. I did not grow up here. I didn't grow up in the neighborhood or anything like that. But I can already see in the short time that I've been here that everything that has been said sounds absolutely 100% right on to me. And I think whichever option we choose, whatever pieces and parts we have to call out because of funding or whatever we think we can and can't get, I think Jefferson absolutely, in my mind, has to be fully funded at the very top. Historically, and even if you just look at it today in a vacuum, that building, those grounds, those kids absolutely need our attention. And I'm very encouraged by some of the responses that I've heard on in the different breakouts. It's my hope that the board is listening 100% to what is being said, and that absolutely, ride this wave if we can catch it right now when the community is in support, then put that in front of the community and ask them to pay the money to get it done, because it absolutely positively must in my opinion, and it seems like that's the opinion of several other people here and throughout the community, needs to get done. Just has to. And I feel a little ineloquent trying to say it. I'm feeling a little emotional about it, but it just seems like when other schools have gotten attention and Jefferson's been passed over, it seems like it just can't happen again. As important as all the other schools in this district are, Jefferson, we have an absolute splendid opportunity to do the best thing possible, I think. So thank you all for having us.
I would like to chime in. This is Nicole Watson. Good evening, everyone. I just want to echo, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Thaddeus. And Miss Mary came with the word today. We appreciate that. And Mr. Hobson, I think that, being one of the educators in this district, I am always trying to understand that we're operating at the speed of trust. And there's been a lot of harm and a lot of pain at the hands of this district. And as one of your educators in it, we are a part of the brick laying and the brick building that attempts to soothe some of that pain. But our budgets are moral documents. And it is time that we put our children, our Black children, at the forefront of our budgets. And it is paramount that we do that in this moment. Well, I think if we are honest about what it says if we do, I think I'm more afraid of what it will mean if we don't. Mm-hmm. This plan, this option, it looks like bond 3, the option 3 is the only option that includes fully funding our Black children, and they need it. We need it. I needed it. As as a product of PPS and an SEI alum, we need it, and it's been past time due. The fact that we're still talking about this in 2020 says that the leaders before us have got us to this point, and now it's our opportunity to take us into the next iteration of excellence. And it is really paramount that we do that in this moment, and that we are a part of the many hands that make this work light. So I hope that also, just as one of your educators saying, I am behind what Rakaya has laid out, the albino vision. I can't wait to get behind it, dig into the details a little bit more, and figure out how I, as an educator, can fully support. Thank you all for your time tonight.
I wonder if I could jump in here. This is Dean Smith, Southwest Portland resident. Been following this process now for several months. I am impressed by the eloquent voices that we're hearing from some of the Black residents of the neighborhoods and teachers. And I had been concerned when the initial plans were for an 8-year, $1.4 billion bond measure, and I thought that was not going to go down well with voters. I'm still concerned about the $1 billion price tag of option 3, but I'm having a hard time arguing against any of the things that are in option 3, because I think it's important to honor the commitments that have been made to Jefferson High School and its interest groups, and I think it's important to complete the Benson program and the multiple pathways to graduation program. I think it's all important. I can't argue against any of that. I do think that if we move forward with the Jefferson High School modernization, that we have to at the same time commit to what we're going to do for Cleveland and Grant, make sure those are in the next round of funding. But I do think Jefferson is first in line and ought to be first in line. And I don't know where to cut. I'm worried that even a $1 billion bond measure in 4 years is going to be hard to swallow for people who are out of work or suffering problems related to the pandemic. On the other hand, it's hard to argue against any of these things. If it's possible for the board to find another $100 million or $150 million out of the option 3. I don't know where you would cut, but I think a smaller amount, less than $1 billion, would be more palatable to voters. However, if your polling is showing that there's an appetite for spending $1 billion on these really important improvements, then I would be all for it. And I'm sure that a lot of us in Southwest Portland who might tend to favor Wilson because it's our home high school would much prefer Jefferson move forward, and as long as Wilson's going to be taken care of in due time. So I guess that's where I've come down. I'm okay with a four-year, pretty big ticket bond measure. I just wish that that big polling shows it'll pass.
Thank you. I want to be respectful of people's time and just talk a little bit about next steps, and then if folks have any other closing comments. I do want to note that there's still opportunities for folks who were not able to make it tonight virtually, that there's a survey that's out there. There's hopefully you received the links to places where you can do feedback. I also want to let folks know that we're working with some of our partners, including SEI, and other partners, to also create a series of focus groups, because we do believe in the power of a broad town hall like this. We want to be able to also create some more detailed and focused place so that we can really hear the voices of our students of color, of our parents, of our community members who are part of our community, and we really want to sort of make sure that we're living out our focus on Black and Native students. And so we want our focus groups to make sure that we're really reflecting that commitment to center the experiences and our plans on our students of color. So more to come. The board, I just want to maybe turn it over to the board to maybe close us out, or if there's any other comments. I want to thank everyone for your time and for your words and for your for the shared sense of hope about what we can do for our community. I'm really excited. So I'll turn that over to our Chair Constance. Do you want to take it away?
Just well said, Danny, and thank you everybody for showing up and participating, and just really being so inspirational and prodding us to think big, because I happen to agree now is the time. We have an amazing opportunity before us for our kids. So thank you for being part of that.
Thank you, everyone. We're not going to go back into the big group, so you're welcome to stay if you have any more comments, or also get back to this Portland summer night. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Nice to see you, Margaret.
Danny, I'm not going to try to hold you up, but I know that there was that question or the comment from Mrs. Smith about concern about what the public is going to be willing to fund. Do we have a sense of what, I mean, are we doing polling or whatever, to get a good sense of like what the public will fund? And is that something you're willing to share?
So, there's a campaign piece to this that's separate because of the rules around sort of like what we can do as like public employees. So we can certainly connect you with our campaign folks. The board really oversees that, but I will say that there is a plan to release a poll. I think we're, it's like a fast moving train, right? We're trying to get more input to make sure that what gets referred is really robust and helpful, and also kind of get more information from all our different channels. And so I'm not sure when the poll is going to go out, but there is some polling that's there, and that will certainly be one point of information. What I know of our board is that they're also really intensely interested in some of our focus groups, and so I'm really excited about some of the focus groups that we're going to have. I know students are out of school, so we have asked sort of high schools to kind of connect us with students, but we are also working with like our partners like SEI, Step Up, some Latino network to sort of like pull students. And then we're also doing very specific family groups. So we have a Native family group, a Spanish speaking group, and then a sort of like Black community leader and Black family group as well. So so that'll be another point of information. You know what I mean? So it's
understood.
Yeah. So
is it safe to say that has gone into the 3 options as listed with the totals being suggested in those, or I know I've heard that maybe this isn't the end of it, so it could just all get rearranged or rewritten, option 4 or 5 or 10 or whatever. Is that safe to say that all those are connected?
Yeah, I mean, my sense is that the options we're trying to coalesce around some options, but they're going to kind of keep adding. And so, like, for example, the presentation that we had from Rukaya today, like, that was something that's a fast moving train and that's emerging. So we're trying to respond to be able to think about what an option would sort of more fully fleshed out look like. So I think there's probably some more sausage making. I hate that term, but there's some more sausage making around the options. There's still some time to kind of take all this input to inform it.
Do you mind sharing how recently the Albina Vision Trust and the Center for Black Excellence came across to the board, and has that been something that's been going on for a while, or is it something that's more recent?
Well, so the Albina Trust has the Albina Vision as an entity has been sort of like in talks for several years. I think in the last 2 to 3 years they've gotten a little bit more robust. I don't know if you remember the sort of the BESC that's been around. That sort of like, what do we do with that building? That's been around as well. I don't trust my sense of time because of our pandemic timeline has got me really messed up. But I think that there have been lots of, my understanding is that these concepts have been in the African American community for quite some time. I think you heard, Ms. Mary talk about that. I think it's literally been, it feels like it's literally been in maybe the past 1 to 2 weeks where people have been coalescing around the bond, the opportunity, and sort of having conversation with board members. So it feels like it's been both things of sort of like, this has been an idea that's been around for some time, and also this feels like a really new conversation. And so we're trying to be as transparent as possible about all of those things.
Fair enough. Well, I appreciate y'all doing this, and I appreciate your extra time.
No, I think thanks for I'm always excited when we've got educators at our town halls. It makes it really exciting for me. So thanks for your extra time, and hopefully you get some time to kind of rest and recuperate over the summer, because next year is going to continue to be interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like. What's the next opportunity to participate in something along these lines?
Like for the bond?
Yeah, for myself, I guess.
So the next thing would probably be the July 6th work session. And if you'd like, I can try to I can send you that. Well, actually, hold please. It's oh shoot, I just got out of that slide, but it's the July 6th board work session, and there will be some more. We'll have a lot of updates by even just a week. And then we're still doing some of the dates, because the focus groups are for the 6th, 7th, and 8th. So there will be another sort of like place where the board can consider that information as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'd hope to be in on some of the planning discussion, kind of the drafting for the Jefferson, planning, but modernization planning, but I was unavailable to be able to get involved with that. So I'm hoping to be present on whatever comes up next, and so on. So will that be communicated in PPS emails?
Yes, and I'm going to send an email over to our folks who handle all of the emails to make sure that you're on that list. Okay. So sometimes depending on where you are in the organization, sometimes you're in listen, sometimes you're not. So sometimes it's just helpful.
Yeah, it does seem that way. I definitely feel like some things come my way and some things don't.
Yeah, totally. I feel the same way.
All right, and you've got my email there.
I've assumed that you've kind of I know your name, and so I'm just going to look you up in the system.
I'll just put it in the notes here real quick.
Oh, okay, great.
You've got sure it follows the usual.
Oh yeah, awesome, great.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.